guys, it's Izzy and welcome back to my channel. I have not filmed in over like 2 weeks. It's like the 17th of November. I don't think I've actually filmed in November, so I hope this goes okay and that we're getting back into the swing of things, because I was in hospital for most of November, so obviously I could not film. We're already at like the end of November basically, so yes, it's very late, but I had no choice, so here it is. Please watch it. Thanks. I read 20 books in October, so I'm gonna try and make this as snappy as possible. Have I ever been snappy? No, so let's try and not make this 2 hours long. And yes, I have got new shelves, so we are looking slightly different. My rainbow is still there, but it's like quite a lot further up, so sadly it's not in my videos, but I will insert a clip of all of my shelves. I was gonna do a video reorganizing my shelves, but then I realized that would take up so much memory, and I don't have that much memory, so because it took hours. But yeah, that's basically all the updates you need from my life. Let's hopefully get a better schedule until the new year, fingers crossed. So yeah, let's get started with my October wrap up on the 17th of November. The first book I read in October was I Will Always Write Back by Caitlin Alafranca, I think, and this is kind of a non-fiction book about two children who were in school. I think they were like 11 or 12, and they were given each other as pen pals. One lives in America, Caitlin lives in America, and then Martin lives in Africa. So we sort of switch between the letters that they send to each other and also just like prose about their lives. They both have different perspectives, so we get to see both of their lives, and basically we follow them becoming best friends and them also noticing the disparity in their lives. Like Caitlin starts to realise how privileged and lucky she is as she learns about how impoverished Martin's life is in Africa. So this book I gave 5 stars. It was just beautiful. I can't tell you how much it warmed my heart. I got the recommendation from Pastel Pages, who I will link down below. Lovely, love Desi, and yeah, I just am so glad that she recommended it, because it was such a heartwarming read. Like, it literally just made me believe in humanity again for a bit, because it was just so beautiful and just, oh, I loved it so much. I loved Caitlin and Martin. I loved the friendship that they built, and just, it was just so emotional and just, oh, it just made me so happy, and I can't recommend it enough. Don't be put off by the fact that it's non-fiction if you don't read non-fiction, because it very much writes and feels like a story, and if I didn't know it was non-fiction I would kind of think it was a like story fiction book. So yeah, it was fantastic and definitely a great way to start off October's reading, and it just was so good. I just loved it so much. If I can recommend a book to you, it has to be this one, because it is just so lovely. If you need something to get you out of a reading slump, I would highly recommend this. It's really quick and easy, and 2, if you just need something to warm your cold soul, then this is the book for you. I then read How to Make a Wish by Ashley Herring Blake, and this was also a 5-star, so my reading month started off strong, that's for sure. This is about our main character Grace and her relationship with her mother who is very unpredictable and has always kind of caused chaos and upset in Grace's life. And Grace moves in with her mum's new boyfriend, and then she meets a girl who is staying with her best friend, and her name is Eva, and she is grieving her mother who has recently passed away. So these girls bond together and both are having very difficult times with their mothers in very, very different ways, and they start to form a relationship, and a romantic relationship, as all Ashley Herring Blake books have. They all have female-female relationships, and yes, so it basically follows these two girls as they are trying to deal with two very different issues, but also kind of a similar issue. And we just follow Grace as she learns how to love herself and how to love other people who actually look out for her, and how to stand up for herself a bit more. And it's just such a beautiful book. It I loved it so much. I also loved the writing in this book. Ashley Herring Blake really managed to make just everything come alive. Her writing was detailed and lyrical without being verbose and sort of overly saturated and flowery writing, and she made me feel so many emotions from every character. I could just feel them so viscerally, and she just made everything come to life. And even just the settings, they live in this lighthouse, and even that just came alive. And honestly, this is one of my favourite relationships in a book ever. So yeah, just everything was perfect basically. I loved this book and I don't think it gets enough hype. So again, if there's a book I can recommend, it would be this one, and I will always write you back. They're just so good. The next book I read was Frankly in Love by David Yoon. This is a book that I don't remember much of. It's basically about this boy called Frank Lee, and he is dating a white girl. He is Chinese American, and so he is dating a white girl, which would not go down well with his parents. And he has an old childhood friend who is also dating a white boy, and so that also won't go down well with her parents. And basically they decide that they'll pretend to be in a relationship so that their parents will be satisfied and they can still date the people that they want to date. I honestly have no recollection of the plot of this. I gave it 3 stars, but in all honesty I think that was kind of high. I know some people really loved this book, but I just really didn't connect to anything. I think the characters were kind of one-dimensional, the relationships were boring, the plot felt very predictable, and really nothing happened, or at least I can't remember. And I can remember one plot point to do with Frank's dad, but that's literally it. I just think it was very average and unmemorable, and just I don't know what people were giving 5 stars. This is one book that I genuinely can't really understand such high ratings for it. It definitely wasn't bad, there was nothing obviously wrong with it. I just didn't think any of it was good. It was just very, very average for me. And yeah, like I said, I literally remember nothing about it. So that's always a good way for me to figure out if I liked a book or not, is if I can remember it a few weeks later, and if I can't, it's usually because I didn't care enough to remember it. Luckily, I then read The Tyrants Tomb by Rick Riordan. This is the 4th book in the Trials of Apollo series, and I also gave this 5 stars. So we ditched Frankly in Love with the 3-star and came on to another 5-star. This book was so good. I can't really tell you what this book in specific was about because it's the 4th book in the series, but basically this series follows Apollo as he is cast down to Earth by his godly father Zeus, and he is made to be mortal, and he is the god of prophecies when he's a god, and so all his prophecies have kind of like broken and are no longer producing any prophecies, which is important for like demigod quests. So basically he is charged with finding and saving all these oracles so that he can restore his godliness. And this book definitely was incredible. This is a series that just gets better and better with each book. If you weren't a massive fan of the first one, I would implore you to continue with the series, because it just gets better every book, and this book was no exception. This book was just incredible. I do think the first quarter suffers slightly with being a bit boring and kind of setting up the rest of the book, but like the other 3 quarters were fantastic, and the last quarter I literally couldn't put it down. It's a pretty chunky book, and I just like flew through the last like third to a quarter because I literally couldn't put it down. It was so good. The plot just kind of like builds into this fantastic culmination, and it really feels like the climax, like a proper climax to a book. The character growth that Apollo continues to go through in this book is so heartwarming and endearing, and I just love Apollo as a character. He sucks in book 1, but that's the point, and by book 4 he's really starting to become a really well-rounded, wonderful person. And also, I've never been a big fan of Meg in these books, but she was definitely at her most mature in this book, which I appreciated. And also all the cameos, that was maybe the best part, because we got to see a lot of characters from the Heroes of Olympus series, and I was just so happy to have them back with me. My children were reunited, and yeah, it was just all wonderful. Apart from the first quarter being a bit boring, everything was perfect. The next book I read was The Throne of Fire by Rick Riordan. This is the second book in the Kane Chronicles. I gave this book 4 stars. I was rereading all Rick Riordan books so I could do my ranking of every Rick Riordan book ever. I will link that video up in the cards. It also explains how to read Rick Riordan's books if you're confused about which series to start with, etc. And yeah, so I was rereading all of them. My least favourite book of Rick Riordan's is the first Kane Chronicles book. I just don't think it was a strong book, but the second book was really great. This follows 2 siblings, Sadie and Carter, as they are thrust into the world of Egyptian gods and myths, etc., after their dad sacrifices himself for this mysterious object thing. So yeah, we follow Sadie and Carter, and the overall plot is that Apophis, the god of chaos, is going to like eat the sun. He's a snake and he's gonna eat the sun, and the world will be in chaos, so they have to stop that. Funnily enough, not great to be in a world of chaos. So yes, and I really enjoyed it. That's all I've got to say on it, really. Next book I read is another Ashley Herring Blake book, and this is Ivy Aberdeen's Letters to the World, and this is a middle grade book that she wrote. This follows our main character, Ivy Aberdeen, as her home is torn apart by a tornado, or is it a hurricane? I'm not sure, but we are following her as her life is kind of uprooted, and she feels like her family don't really want her around, and that they're kind of better off without her. And she starts to develop friendships with another girl who she begins to maybe have feelings for, and also at the same time, when this hurricane happened, she managed to take all her art with her, and in her art she draws girls holding hands, and she then loses this art, and someone starts sending her pictures to her, and she's not sure who or kind of what they want from her. And this book is just so good. This was another 5 stars. I had a great reading month in October, and this was just so good. I just loved it so much. It was so pure and just such a beautiful story about friendship and family and kind of finding your place, and just overall it was such a fantastic book, and I think if you're even remotely interested in middle grade, this is a great one to read. It was just so lovely, and the kind of discovery of her like sexuality and kind of how to tell people how she feels is just all handled so brilliantly, and I really liked the aspect of her not feeling like she has a place in her family. And yeah, overall it was just such a beautiful book, and I will read Ashley Herring Blake's shopping list if she wants me to, because she's that good of a writer. So yes, loved this book. I then read Maybe This Time by Casey West. I gave it 3 stars, and this is another one that I barely remember. Basically this follows our main character, don't remember her name, and she is like, she works for the like florist in her small town, and basically they do the like flowers and kind of events for every event basically in this town, and every event she meets this boy who is the son of like the caterer, I think, and basically it's just like maybe this time they'll get together, and it follows I think like 8 or 9 different events, and yeah, that's basically what I remember from it. I enjoyed reading it. It was a fun time. Was it anything special? No, but it definitely was probably my favourite Casey West book. I haven't really enjoyed any of her books that much, but this one was pleasant enough. So yeah, if you want something light-hearted and romantic, then this is a good enough book. It was just very average. I did like it better than Frankly in Love though, so yeah. The next book I read was The Serpents Shadow by Rick Riordan. This is the 3rd book in the Kane Chronicles, and I don't really need to explain what it's about because I just explained it like 2 books ago. So that's what it's about. Basically they're stopping Apophis, and I gave this book 4 stars as well. I think it was a really great book and a really great culmination of the trilogy. It had a really great like action sequence and like final battle kind of thing, and I think the plot did get a bit bitty and confusing at times, but I think it all really merged well into a great final battle scene and just kind of a great final book. So I really enjoyed it, and yeah, it was a really strong finish. I then got kind of into a historical fiction kick, which has never happened to me ever. I don't avoid historical fiction, but I definitely don't really seek it out. If it's in a book that I'm interested in, then I'll read it, but it's definitely not something that I go out of my way to read. But I read Lovely War by Julie Berry. This I actually got recommended by Sarah from Sarah the Dreamer. I'll also link her down below. She's also wonderful, and I'm so glad I read this. This is basically kind of half Greek gods, half historical fiction. It sounds weird, but it really works. It's basically, we start off this book with Aphrodite cheating on her husband Hephaestus. Hephaestus, I never know how you say his name, but Hephaestus, with another god, and she basically goes on trial, and she says that she wants to tell the stories of her, in her opinion, the greatest love stories that she has witnessed over the years, and she tells the story of 2 couples who are part of the First World War, or is it the Second World War? Pretty sure it's the First World War. Basically, we follow 2 girls who are volunteering to be like nurses kind of thing in the war, and 2 boys who are soldiers, and one boy is black, and so we quite focus a lot on how it was to be black in that time and how they were treated in the army, which was terribly. And yeah, we just follow some really interesting plot lines. I thought the addition of the Greek gods really helped to move the book along and make it just a bit more interesting than telling the story of these 2 couples, but overall it was just a really beautiful book, and I think it was just so well done, so well written, and I came to really care about the characters. I didn't really care about their romance, which I guess is kind of the point, but I just really cared about the characters, I cared about the situation. And yeah, I gave it 4 stars if I didn't say. But it was just really beautiful and a real surprise because I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, but I'm really glad I did. The next book I read was Just One Day by Gail Forman. I gave this book 2 stars. Basically this follows our main character whose name I can't remember and whose name it doesn't say on the back, so we're just gonna call her the main character. And she is on this like school trip in Paris, and for this one day she meets this boy who's part of like a Shakespeare troupe thing, and like spends the day in this whirlwind romance with this boy, and then kind of wakes up and he's gone, and then we follow her for like the next year, and she just wants to find this boy again. I did not like this book, to be honest. It's lucky it got 2 stars and not 1 star. I don't really remember this book either. I think I've kind of blocked it out of my memory because it sucked a lot. It was just so dumb. Like, she was so obsessed with this boy she'd spent 1 day with. Who spends their life finding a boy you spent 1 day with? She was like, oh, I love him. How can you love someone after 1 day? I call stupid. I don't have anything to say except this book is dumb, sucked, and wasn't even interesting, and it's like 400 pages or something. There's a sequel. I will not read it. What the hell is the sequel even going to be about? Nothing happened to this. I did not like it. The next book I read on my historical fiction kick was Salton Sea by Ruta Sepetys. I gave this book 4.5 stars. Can I say I enjoyed it? No, because it broke my heart into a million pieces. If that doesn't make you want to read the book, what will? But basically this follows a real life event that happened in World War II, where there was this German ship who was taking refugees to somewhere safe, I don't remember, and basically its capacity was like 1,500 or something, but they packed like 10,000 refugees onto this one ship, and we follow like 6 kind of different characters, and I think we have like 3 points of view, and then there's like a group of characters as they are trying to get onto this ship and to safety, and they are all doing it for different reasons. They have all come from different places, and we follow what happens on this ship after it starts to sink. So yes, that is basically this true event that happened in history. There was this ship that was bombed and killed a lot of people. I'll let you read the book, but that is just an event that never gets talked about in history, and I'm so glad Ruta Sepetys wrote this book and kind of showed another side of history. Obviously the characters are made up, but the event was real, and I think she made the characters so real and the situation so real, and it just was, I have no words. It was just incredible and also so emotional. And was I okay? Will I ever be the same? Jury's out. The next book I read was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I buddy read this with Becca from Pistachio Paperbacks. I will leave her channel down below as well because she's the best. And yeah, we all know what Ninth House is about, right? Basically this follows our main character Alex as she is accepted to Yale. Is it at Yale? I always get the stupid American places confused. Yes, Yale. As she is at Yale and she is part of this secret society which is the Ninth House, and basically they have all these secret societies at Yale that are kind of like supernatural, and she is part of a house that is in charge of kind of keeping the other houses in line and keeping people safe, but she is special in that she can see ghosts and kind of communicate with ghosts, and we basically follow her doing that, and her like mentor goes missing and they are trying to find out where he went and how to get him back, and also there's been a murder which they're trying to solve, and it's just all wild. And I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed this, but I do think it was quite dense and slightly pretentious in its writing, so I definitely struggled a little bit to get through it, but it was a really good book and I'm super excited for the second book. I think it's going to be so good. I think it could have been written a bit more simply and that would have made it easier to read, because I just kind of felt dumb while reading it. I was like, oh my god, Leigh Bardugo's brain, like my brain is here, Leigh Bardugo's brain is like not even on the screen. So yeah, I'm really excited for the second book. I then read Summer of Salt by Katrina Leto, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This was such a beautiful book. This follows our main character. I can't remember anyone's name, this was too long ago. This follows kind of two twins, but our main character is Georgina, and she has a twin sister called Mary, and they live on this island called By the Sea, which is this tiny little island where there's like few hundred people, and every year during the summer there's this special bird that comes to the island, and the bird watchers come and stay and kind of look for this magical bird. And in Georgina's family there is kind of minor magic that every woman gets, and she has not come into her powers and is worried that she might have been missed out and that she won't be getting any powers. But this follows her relationship with her sister and her family, and also a girl, so this is another female-female relationship. And yeah, this does have a trigger warning for rape, sexual assault, nothing explicit but it's talked about. And yeah, it was just such a beautiful book. It's kind of hard to explain. I would say just read it. It's magical realism, but not too magical realism-y. Like, magical realism isn't my favourite genre, but this I think did it with such a great like balance, and it was just a really beautiful book, and I would highly recommend reading it and kind of just go into it blind, because I sort of did, and I was just really taken with the story, and it was just a really immersive experience. I then read Pulp by Robin Talley. This is kind of a confusing book because it follows a lot of storylines, but basically it follows our main character as she decides to make her like final project about this lesbian pulp fiction, and so we follow her story, and we also follow this story of this author who is like her favourite author who only wrote this one book, and we follow her timeline, but we also follow like the stories as well, so it gets a bit confusing. I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was a really great like proper lesbian story, which I think we get very watered down versions of, but this like really just was about like lesbians and lesbian culture and just kind of everything to do with that, and I really appreciated that because, like I said, I think we just get such watered down versions of that, and this book just really went for it. I really enjoyed it, but in the end it didn't like blow me away, and I think it needed kind of more clear storylines, and I don't know, I enjoyed it. It just wasn't quite as good as I was hoping for. Like the first like 20% I thought it was going to be a 5-star read, and then it just kind of got a bit lost, I think. But I don't know, maybe I might like higher its rating because it was definitely better than like Frankly in Love, so I don't know. But if you want to read a book that's like properly about lesbian and lesbian culture, then I would recommend this book. It definitely wasn't a bad book by any stretch of the imagination, so if that's something you were looking for, then I would say go for it. The next book I read was The Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll. I read this because I kind of wanted to read something kind of spooky and thrillery and creepy, I guess. And this follows our main character, Annie, and basically Annie has this like perfect life where she has this perfect boyfriend and she's like cultivated herself to be this like perfect woman, and then she is invited to do this documentary about this really violent event that happened at her school, and it kind of brings back all these memories, and we follow her current timeline but also a lot of her timeline as a teenager and what she went through as a teenager and in high school, and we kind of start to piece together like what happened and why she is the way she is, because she's a very unlikable character. But I gave this book 3 stars. It was interesting and like I enjoyed reading. I actually listened to the audiobook and I'm not sure I would have got through it if I read it physically, because it definitely had a lot of moments that were kind of just like meh, but then it did have some really strong moments, so it was relatively good, and I would suggest if you're kind of looking for a thrillery audiobook to listen to, then this was a pretty good one. But it definitely wasn't extremely captivating or anything like that. It was just kind of like past the time, was entertaining enough, but it wasn't anything special and certainly didn't really keep me on the edge of my seat. I then read Colour Outside the Lines by Sangu Mandana, who is like the editor, but this is a collection of short stories which came out like a week, like on the 12th I think it came out, of November. I got like an early e-arc. I did write a full review down below. I will link it on Goodreads, so if you want to know my more in-depth thoughts then you can look at that. But basically it's a kind of collection of stories about couples and couples who have very different like cultural divides, and them kind of blending together and learning about each other's culture and kind of just bringing 2 very different people together. And I thought there were some really strong stories, and there was quite a lot of female-female relationships, which was really nice to see, and I definitely enjoyed a lot of the stories and they were really creative. There were some like magical realism ones and just some really just nice charming ones, and yeah, I rated all of the stories, so if you want to see more then you can check out my Goodreads review, which I will link down below. But it was just a really enjoyable short story collection, and if you're looking for one, if you're a fan of short story collections, then I would recommend this one. I gave it like 3.5 stars because I like averaged out all my star ratings for the different stories, but yeah, they were some really strong ones and it was definitely a fun read, so if you're looking for a short story collection, pick that one up. I then read Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. I gave this 2.5 stars, but to be honest it was probably a 2-star. This is about a girl who, well, a woman who goes back to her small town after there are some like girls gone missing who have been murdered, and she kind of escaped this small town, but she decides to go back for journalism purposes, and she kind of gets sucked back into this environment that she worked hard to get rid of, and into a very toxic family that she worked hard to get out of. And yeah, we follow as she tries to like solve this mystery. And I listened to the audiobook, which was a terrible audiobook. I would not recommend the audiobook at all. I wouldn't really recommend this book, to be honest. I think the story was super boring. Nothing really happened until like the end, like literally nothing happened, and I think the reveal was obvious, and yeah, I just think it was boring and obvious, so not exactly what you want from a thriller. That's basically all I have to say on it. I just didn't care for it at all, really, which I was disappointed by. I did want to read Gone Girl, which I think I would enjoy more, but that wasn't available as an audiobook, so I read this one instead. regrets. Okay, we're on the penultimate book, and that is Dear Evan Hansen by, who wrote it? Val MH. I gave this book 4 stars. I love Dear Evan Hansen the musical. Like, that and Hamilton are like ride or die for me. I've not seen either of them, which is tragic, but I listen to the soundtrack like every day because I'm obsessed with Dear Evan Hansen. And I hadn't read the book because I think initially it didn't get great reviews, and I didn't kind of want to mar my love of Dear Evan Hansen. But when I checked, it had like 4 stars, like the average Goodreads review, and I had it as an audiobook, and I decided to give it a listen, and I really enjoyed it. It was really good, and I think it fit really well with the musical, and it was just really enjoyable seeing all these characters and like reading about them and getting much more detail and kind of really getting inside their heads, especially Evan's head. If you don't know what it's about, basically a boy at Evan's school commits suicide, Connor, and he kind of gets involved in a lot of lies because people think he was really good friends with Connor, and that seems to be helping his family. So Evan feels really bad for Connor's family and kind of just wants to help, but just gets stuck in this web of lies, and he starts to realise that no one should be forgotten, basically, and that everyone has a place and everyone is loved, and it's just a really beautiful story. I don't think it had quite the emotional impact as the musical does, because I think the music from the show really adds that emotional element, but I think it was a really good adaptation of the musical, and I'm really glad I read it. And the final book I read in October was The Surface Breaks by Louise O'Neill. I still haven't actually given this a star rating because I'm very torn. This is a Little Mermaid retelling, and it follows our main character. I thought her name was Murgen, but I think someone said it was Morgan, which makes more sense, but it's spelled weird. And she wants to escape this place where she lives because her father is extremely controlling. She's being sent to marry a man who is far older than she is, and she does not want to marry him, so she goes to the sea witch and tries to make a bargain with her to give her like legs and to let her live on land, because she saw this boy for like 2 seconds and fell in love with him. Wow, why is that a thing? But basically she gets to land and finds out that it's not really everything she thought it was going to be. I don't know how I feel about this book. It's a very divisive book. I think you either love it or hate it, and I'm kind of in the middle. Like, I kind of love and hate it. I hated most of it, but then I kind of liked the ending. I'm not the person to review this because I really don't know how I feel about it. If it sounds interesting, give it a go. I mean, you might really love it. You might also hate it, but you might really love it. And yeah, it was just a weird book that took a lot of turns. The thing that most annoyed me, right, was, so she got legs, and the sea witch was like, every step you take is gonna be like agony, and this bitch was like, yeah, I'm down. And basically every time she describes, she's like, oh, it feels like acid is being poured on my feet, or like it feels like my skin's being ripped off, but it never stops her doing anything. She's like walking along and it's like, oh my god, it's so painful, but she just keeps going. Like, it never stops her doing anything, and I'm like, I'm sorry, if it feels like acid is being poured on your feet to walk, I think you'd slow down a bit. But she just like does everything, and I'm like, that's so dumb. That's literally the thing that annoyed me the most, because every time she was like, oh, it feels like I'm like walking on like bear traps, and it's like, then why are you like running? Oh, that annoyed me so much. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about this book. I don't know. I got the recommendation from Pamela from My Bookish Journey, so I'll see which video she like reviewed it in and link it down below, or I'll just link her channel because she loves this book and probably gives a lot better, more coherent thoughts on it than I have. Hi guys, this is Editing Izzy, and I realised I missed one of the books that I read in October because I'm dumb. But the last book I actually read in October was Tarnished Are the Stars by Rosie Thor. This is like a sci-fi. If you've read the Lunar Chronicles, it gives me a very similar vibe to that. So if you're a fan of the Lunar Chronicles, I highly recommend this book. But it's basically about this sci-fi world where these people living on the outskirts of this settlement are becoming sick with tarnished hearts, and they need treatment, but it's kind of like outlawed. And so this girl kind of teams up with this princess and this like prince. They're not princes and princesses, but they're like basically the same thing, and they kind of plot to take down the government. It's really hard to explain, but it was really good. I gave it 4.5 stars. I loved the characters. They were like all queer, which was really cool. There was a female romance, which was great, and one of the characters was asexual, and it was basically just the Lunar Chronicles that the gays deserved. So it was great. Would highly recommend. I just missed it out because I thought I finished it in November, but then I checked and I finished it in October, so that's why I forgot to mention it. But it was great. Would highly recommend. Excuse my wet hair and gross face, but yeah, read it. It was great. But that is finally it. We have finally reached the end of the 20 books I read in October. Thank the Lord. Sorry if this was kind of not my best wrap up because I read them a little while ago, so they're a little bit hazy, but yes, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm so glad to be back, and I hope I can stay with a more regular schedule now. So yes, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!